I never wanted to tell this to anyone. The craft was not like the movies, an impossible geometry bleeding light. It hung above the field like a thought made visible. When the being pressed its cool fingertip to my forehead, code and mind braided together. My vision split open, and I saw past the veil that hides money. In 24 hours, $500,000 landed in my account. It was not luck. It was not coincidence. It was cosmic mathematics. If I tell you abundance is not a miracle, but a frequency you can tune to, would you listen when I show you how to find the dial? A larger proof waits ahead. 3 weeks earlier, I was simply a man with too many numbers chasing him. My name is Michael Andrade. 53 years carved into my hands and my neck. I was an ex-entrepreneur who had misread one contract and watched a decade of work dissolve. The bank had sent the final notice. They gave me 30 days. The house felt borrowed from a stranger. Mornings began with the same small betrayals. I woke in sweat. The lamp threw a cone of tired light over the cracked bathroom mirror. I checked the balance and saw nothing but a slow, blank plane. I drank coffee that tasted like paper. Bills crawled in my inbox like insects. Each message had the same tone, a polite demand that felt like a verdict. I told myself there was no solution. The phrase became a rhythm I tapped on my chest. I sold what I could. A couch first, then the television with its dull, comforting glow. Later a cabinet that had held trophies and receipts. The apartment shrank. The room sounded larger for every object that left. I slept on a mattress on the floor. The silence there was not empty. It screamed. At night I walked. The field behind the house was not dark so much as patient. The stars seemed to be waiting for someone to notice them. The air smelled of cut grass and old oil from the nearby workshop. My hands were cold. A prickle started in my fingers and crawled up my spine. Behind the nape of my neck there was a pressure, soft but insistent, as if someone were riding on the back of my mind. I tried to be rational about everything. I called a lawyer and left a message that sounded like a surrender. I sent polite emails to suppliers I could not pay. I rehearsed apologies I would deliver to clients. At lunch, a former partner met me for empanadas. He looked at my face and then at the empty ring around my finger. He asked about the business like it was a chapter in a book he had once skimmed. That evening I walked farther. The air grew thin and cool. Crickets kept time like a cheap metronome. A light started in the distance, a bright, irregular pulse, like a pair of lungs breathing through glass. At first I thought it was a car. Then the light bent. Not reflection, intent. My feet felt heavy, as if the ground had decided to hold me in place. I tried to move, and my tendons resisted like old ropes. I remember the exact sound of my breath then. It was a small metallic rasp. The grass pressed at my calves. The air took on a metallic taste that made the back of my tongue feel wired. In that moment I felt watched. Not by one neighbor or a dog. Something vast and patient watched from above. Before I knew it, the light folded itself toward the earth. The sky cleaved. The field filled with an odor like ozone and lemons. My stomach clenched and then loosened as if something had opened a window in me. I wanted to run. My legs were clay. I wanted to stay. My chest tightened with a curious hope I had not felt in years. If you are watching this and you have stayed with me so far, thank you. This channel is new and every view helps. If this story reaches 1,000 curious people, perhaps we can speak more openly about what I learned. Leave a comment with your city and country. It matters where we awake. A flash carved the world in half. Something arrived that would not be explained by any rational map I had ever kept. The light came from nowhere and everywhere at once. It did not fall, it breathed. It contracted, then expanded, as if inhaling the earth. At first I thought it was a lightning bolt without ring. The sound was a low, almost polite thrum that I felt more than heard. My feet sank. The soil took me like a hand pulling a cord. The object, the ship, if that is what the word will have to do, rested like mercury spilled across the grass. It had the sheen of old instruments and the color of a deep river at night. It made no noise when it opened. A field, thin and palpable, stitched itself around me. The hairs on my arms rose like antennas. Then he stepped out. It is the only honest word. He was not a man. He was a movement that sometimes formed into a body. Skin like frosted glass, filigree lines moving under the surface like currents. When he turned, his eyes were black wells with specks of light like a dusk sky full of distant suns. He was taller than I am used to, maybe 2 meters, but he did not feel heavy. He moved as if gravity had become an optional rule for him. He did not speak. The words arrived inside me, not through the mouth. They were clear as the chime of a bell and close as a whisper. "You called," he said, and it was not a question. The message pressed without pressure, like a palm over the mind. I could only answer with the smallness I had left. I did not call anyone. I had not wanted anything grand. I stammered mentally. The being did not laugh. He tilted the head that was not quite a head and offered a kind of attention that made my fear melt into something else. "Every thought is a call," he said. "Every feeling signals. You transmit without knowing you transmit." My heart felt as if it had been rewired. The beats were loud and musical. I felt strange safety in the center of the storm. The field around us hummed. It pressed a coolness into my forehead like a cloth. He named himself Cyrus. The name sat in me like a stone settling into water. "Your planet is waking," he said. "Some of you are ready to remember." I asked the simplest question I could find. Remember what? There was a pause that was full of planets. The answer arrived clear and impossible. How to create reality. The sentence hung like a suspended tool. It should have been a lecture. It was not. It was an invitation dressed as a fact. My body tightened and then loosened. The air tasted like metal and rain. I was terrified and strangely calm at once. Fear and safety braided into a single rope I could hold. Cyrus raised a hand. Between long, blade-like fingers a pattern unfurled, a film of moving light, like a small window of glass filled with ocean waves. It changed when I inhaled. It mirrored me. When he said, "This is you," he did not mean the skin or the tired bones. He meant the shape my thoughts made in the air. The first revelation was about the smallest thing, a coin my father had given me when I was a boy. When I thought of it, the image blossomed between Cyrus's fingers, dented edge, faded inscription, the familiar nick where I had dropped it years before. The image was precise enough to make my breath hitch. That moment split the world into before and after. I laughed despite myself. I said I was losing my mind. Cyrus did not argue. He offered a demonstration. He told me to sit on the grass. He taught me a breath that felt like counting, but was not numbers. He showed a movement of the hands that looked like tracing the path of a river. He asked me to project something small and unlikely. He wanted a test where the margin for coincidence would be thin. I chose a call. I thought of Raphael, an old friend who no longer answered my messages. I imagined my phone lighting with his name. Cyrus told me to hold that as if it were a fact already living. I practiced for 20 minutes. Heat rose from my chest and pooled in my palms. My skin prickled. The pattern in Cyrus's hand shifted like a tide. He said nothing. He never lectured. He simply waited with the patience of a slow machine. When he told me to go home, my legs obeyed like trained animals. The door closed behind me with the small echo of a bell. The phone, which had been silent for years, buzzed. The name lit the screen. Raphael. I had the reaction of someone who has been given a miracle and then told to keep the receipt. I answered. His voice was urgent and soft. He said he had dreamed of me and could not shake the feeling to call. I sat down on the floor, and the world made sense in one small place. My chest loosened. The proof was intimate, silly, undeniable. The field around the house left a simple trace, a faint circle of flattened grass. It did not look like anything mystical to the neighbors. To me, it was a scar of a different geometry. I decided, then and there, to test further, to follow the rules that Cyrus hinted at, to continue despite the ridicule I expected. There was more coming. The being had not finished. The next demonstration would stretch the rules of what I called possible. The stakes would rise. He lifted a hand, and the air vibrated. Dust motes moved like small planets. I felt ridiculous and enormous at once. He laid out the simplest law, like setting down a cup. Each feeling, he said, was a frequency. Each frequency organizes matter. When my mind tuned to lack, the world rearranged itself into scarcity. When it tuned to abundance, the geometry opened. It sounded too neat to be true, and yet my coin hung there and flickered like proof. He asked me to name the first pattern of my life. I thought of debts. I felt the shape of them in my belly, a hollowing like a small animal burrowed under ribs. He nodded and traced a slow circle in the air. The circle contracted, and the hollow in my chest shivered. He said, "You have been operating on default frequency, not by accident, by habit." I laughed then, a short wet sound. It was the laugh of a man who has been offered a ladder in a cellar. "So how do I change the station?" I whispered. My hands were cold and clutching grass. The film of light between his fingers combed through the air like a needle tuning a radio. "Not by forcing," he answered. "By being precise." He taught me to notice small distinctions. The difference between longing and knowing. The difference between wanting and existing. He did not give me a mantra. He handed me method. He showed a breath that felt like counting, but was a spiral. He taught a motion of the hands that made the air taste sweeter, less like metal, more like rain. He guided me through one small exercise. Sit. Breathe into the hollow and name, silently, a thing as if it already is. He used the coin as demonstration, then something stranger, a call. He said, "Call is not sound. Call is attention made real." I felt my attention like a flame. He squared the corners of my thinking until it fit the geometry between his fingers. The first revelation left a burn at the base of my skull, warm and promising. It also left a question oiled with danger. If every thought is broadcast, how much have I already been building by accident? The answer would have to come in practice. Mini cliffhanger. He promised a test. A demonstration that would make coincidence look like a child's misreading of the ledger. I did not yet know how far the price would go. He lowered himself until his knees, or where knees would be, touched the grass. The air hummed low and steady. He showed me a sequence. Inhale square, exhale long, hands tracing a slow spiral. Precision, he said. Emotion is the engine. Attention is the key. Form is the map. I copied him. My breath felt clumsy at first. Each inhale gathered heat behind my ribs. The spiral with my hands felt like drawing water from a well. The pattern must be held as fact, not as wish. He kept repeating the line like a metronome inside my skull. Hold as fact. Not future, not maybe. Fact. He asked for something small. Raphael came to mind, an old friend with a laugh like a pocket radio. I pictured Raphael's face as if sliding it into a slot. I felt the sight in my chest like a stone settled in a bowl. Not desire, Zyrus said softly. Fact. See the screen light. Hear the tone. Feel the click. I placed my palms on the earth and let the exercise move through me. The field around my knees tightened. My fingers warmed as if holding a cup. Time thinned. I felt a small tug, like a fish biting bait. I left and walked home with the vibration still in my bones. The phone rang the second I closed the door. The name bloomed on the screen, Rafael Torres. The tone sounded in the room and on my nerves at once identical. I answered with hands that trembled. He was real and awkward and late in apologizing. He had dreamed of me and could not shake whatever drew him. I sat and let the proof settle into the floorboards. That proof became a protocol in my head. Small requests first. Tests with thin margins. A coin, a phone, a word. Each success tasted like salt and made my confidence a little more durable. I wrote them down in a cheap notebook: time, feeling, method, result. The notebook's spine creaked like a clock when I opened it. He scaled the exercises deliberately. Not leaps. Rungs. A call to a person. A coin appearing. A light bulb that had gone out flickering back in a neighbor's house. Small things linked into a pattern. He taught me to observe micro-responses. A bird that unlatched from a wire, a dog that stopped barking, the oven pilot that relit. The world answered in marginal ways before it answered clearly. I learned to manage my doubt like a skill. When fear rose a muscle clenching in my throat, I named it and breathed through it. I let the feeling pass without giving it authority. Cyrus taught me to hold the image longer than the thought of lack, to press the fact into the air so that the air had to rearrange itself. Each session left fingerprints literal and metaphoric. Once, after practicing a sequence for a small cash sum, I found a receipt lodged in an old jacket pocket with exact change I had imagined. Another time, I pictured a repairman arriving at noon, and a stranger knocked on my door at 11:59, tools in hand. These were not fireworks. They were the slow accumulation of physics being learned. I also recorded failures. The exercises are not magic jewelry. The mind jumps, doubt leaks, habits reassert. One evening, doubt gnawed through a practice, and the event I expected did not occur. The sensation was sharp and ached like a lost tooth. Cyrus did not scold. He taught me to hold the failed pattern with the same steadiness as the successful one. Failure is data, he said. Adjust. By day 3, the experiments coalesced into expectation with muscle memory. I could feel the frequency like a limb. I developed a short loop, my personal anchor to settle into the state. Breathe square, spiral hands. Say to myself in a soft cadence, I am the field. I am the fact. The words sounded strange at first. Then they felt like fastening a seatbelt. Loop affirmations I used thin, short, and original became part of my skin. I am the instrument. I do not plead, I state. The phrasing was simple, almost rude in its confidence. Each variation tightened the habit. I am the signal. I am the field that unfolds the world. Mini cliffhanger. The exercises worked. Then he asked for more. He would teach me to reach for numbers that mattered, sums large enough to change my life. The next test would demand a steadier conviction than my small successes could guarantee. I told my sister Beatrice the truth, like telling someone a confession. I watched her face calibrate, blink, purse, then armor. The kitchen smelled of soap and coffee. Her pearls clicked against her collarbone as she spoke. Miguel, you need rest, she said. This is stress. I can book an appointment with Dr. Vasconcelos. Her fingers rubbed the pearl strand like she expected it to steady the world. Her eyes were kind, but thin. I saw the distance that the world keeps from things it cannot account for. I tried to be precise with her. I described the light, the coin, the breath pattern. I spoke slowly, as if reading a patient manual. She folded her arms and cited probability like it was a law that protected her. Aliens who teach you how to get money don't exist, she said. The sentence landed with ordinary cruelty. Outside, the day was small and gray. The city had its usual hum. My neighbor's radio leaked political anger across the courtyard. I felt the weight of my sister's doubt like a threshing. It pulled at the new frequency I was learning to hold. For a moment, I wondered if I'd traded one kind of desperation for another. I went to see Eduardo at a cafe, a man who once praised my plans and later applauded their failure with a laugh. He greeted me with a grin that had corners worn from jokes. I tried again. Imagine a system that responds to clear attention, I said. He sipped and shook his head. Miguel, you sound like someone who ate an old science fiction book, he joked, but the laugh thinned when I did not join. Their rejection was a pressure. It pushed inward. My chest tightened, sleep frayed. I felt lonely in a way that was different from before lonely, because I had to choose to keep testing even when my tribe called for a clinic or a label. The field of my life narrowed to the radius of the exercises. Outside voices echoed like weather reports I could not rely on. At night, I stood by the window and watched the field behind the house. The circle in the grass hummed faintly under moonlight. It was a scar that only I seemed willing to read. The neighbors walked dogs and never crossed it. To them, it was a patch of odd lawn. To me, it was a record of instruction. Doubt is contagious. So is resolve. I returned to practice more stubbornly. I tightened She touched the paper with her index finger as if testing temperature. Her expression softened, not to belief, but to a new kind of worry that had room for mystery. Still, resistance came in other forms. An article on rational economics crossed my feed and landed like an accusation. A neighbor muttered about strange men and strange lights. The world preferred narratives it could name. I had to carry a narrative that could not yet be named without sounding foolish. I reached a personal decision. If this work required being shunned, then shunned I would be. If it required humility and long hours, then I would pay that price. I had already lost so much that loss itself did not frighten me as it once had. The stakes sharpened into clarity. Save the house, reclaim my life. The experiment had a scale. Loop affirmation tightened in the dark. I am the signal. I am the field that unfolds the world. I said it in the kitchen, under the shower, walking past closed shops. Saying it aloud felt like telling the city a secret. Mini cliffhanger. The circle in the grass pulsed one night like a heart. Cyrus returned and said the next step would not be small. He would teach me the proportionate work, the method for sums large enough to change a life. This would test the thing I had become. The night I agreed to scale the work, the air in the yard felt thicker, as if the grass held its breath with me. I remember the cold on the back of my neck. I remember the small lamp on my kitchen table, its circle of light like an island. Cyrus stood in the margin of that light and spoke in fragments that landed like stones. Proportion, he said. Belief must match the ledger. I set my legal file on the table. The number glared at me from the page, 500,000. My hands trembled when I touched the paper. The house kept its quiet complaints. The heater clicking, rain against the roof, a neighbor's muffled TV. The world pressed. I pressed back, tighter. He taught me a longer sequence that day. It was the same language as before: breath, hands, but with geometry written across the air. He traced a wide spiral, then a smaller spiral inside it. Each breath moved a pattern. He wanted my body to learn scale, how the chest holds a pebble and how it holds a boulder. We began with the physical setup. Sit on the floor, knees soft, feet rooted like anchors, palms face down on your thighs. Breathe square 4 counts in, hold 4, exhale long 8. Hands spiral outward with the inhale, trace inward with the exhale. Say the code under your breath as if reading a register. I am the ledger. I hold the measure. I practiced for hours. Time dripped slow and clean, like oil. My shoulders burned. My jaw unclenched, then clenched, then unclenched again. Small sounds in the house seemed to sync with my breath: clock tick, fridge hum, until the house itself became part of the rhythm. I found a method to the burning. When doubt arrived, I indexed it, gave it a name, and returned to the mechanics. Doubt became a small file, not a verdict. We layered in detail. Cyrus asked me to imagine the number not as digits, but as texture. I pictured the paper of a banknote between my fingers. I felt its weave. I heard the soft sound of a check slipped into an envelope. I smelled a hospital file that once contained a payment. The exercise demanded more than wanting. It demanded sensory conviction. There were micro-tests through the day. I called for small things: first, an exact coin in a jacket pocket, a neighbor's light relit, a repaired pilot flame in the oven. Each minor success tightened my nervous system like a guitar string. When the strings held, I turned my attention to the ledger. Cyrus watched, not theatrical, simply present. Hold the sum as condition, he said. Not boast, not pleading. Condition. I set the clock. 24 hours. The ritual schedule was specific. Every hour, I moved through 3 breath cycles and 1 spiral. At the top of each hour, I touched my chest, whispered an anchor phrase, and returned to ordinary tasks for the rest of the minutes. Sleep was shallow, half eye open, because the instruction was to maintain the frequency continuously, not just in formal posture. A strange steadiness grew in my body. My pulse was quieter. My thoughts became fewer but deeper. Small interruptions became data, not derailers. Once, a gnat flew into the room and lodged in the spiral of my hand as I breathed. I watched it move, minute and persistent, and I felt absurdly grateful for the numberless precision of life. Signals appeared as marginal things at first. A courier arrived at noon with the wrong package and left a note. The note contained a name I had not seen in years. A repairman knocked at my door exactly when I had pictured a man with tools arriving, his smile awkward and apologetic. An old client called to postpone a meeting, and in postponing, he mentioned an estate of an acquaintance. Each small event registered like a check mark on the inner ledger. Night held the last stretch. I sat until the hours pressed like glass. I tightened my shoulders and breathed through nameless fear. At 3 a.m., the world stilled. The streetlights haloed the empty road like coins of light. I said the loops quietly, then new loops, raw, now my own. I hold the ledger. I am the measure. I do not bargain. I calibrate. Say them once, twice. Let the throat take them in. Dawn folded the night into gray. The 24 hours approached completion like a tide. At 15:18, the phone rang. The ring was a thin, official sound, no one I expected. My hands moved before my mind did. I answered. "Mr. Andrade," said a woman's voice. "This is Sophia at Mendez and Associates. I'm calling on behalf of the Fernando Mendez estate. We have paperwork indicating you are a beneficiary of a life insurance policy. The amount is $500,000. A small electric shock shot through my body. The punctuation of the woman's voice, the crispness of her language, the clack of keys in the background, these were the physical components of a miracle. I kept breathing square. I let the sound settle into the floorboards of the house. She read the details. I listened like a student. The funds were to be transferred within the day, contingent on signature and identification. I sat down on the kitchen chair, and I cried without sound. It was not ecstatic. It was the body loosening from tension so long held it had begun to feel like bone. The transfer took hours, but arrived the same afternoon. I watched the numbers in the account window like a slow, obedient tide. Then the ledger shifted. I paid the most urgent debts that night. I folded the next plans like paper cranes. Relief came like warm water across the skin. In that relief, there was also a rawness. The money solved one crisis. It did not solve everything. Old habits, suspicion, scarcity huddled at the edges waiting for permission to return. I learned the most important lesson in those first clear hours. A single event of grace is data, not doctrine. The work continued. Mini cliffhanger. The sum arrived, but the question that had haunted me seized the room again. Why me? And what exactly had been written into the air when Cyrus touched my brow? The answer, he said, would not be given as fact. It would be taught as a discipline. He would return to show me how to carry the system. The real test was not landing the money. The test was holding the currency of the self. When Cyrus returned, his light was quieter, like a language turned from shout to phrase. He stood at the edge of the yard, and the grass seemed to bow. Up close, his skin patterns moved like thinking circuits. He did not speak at first. He made a small gesture, and a field of sound smelled like rain. "You have the record," he said. The voice thrummed in the bones. "Now learn to be the operator." I remembered the ledger, the transfer, the sensation of numbers shifting from scarcity to possibility. I was both curious and afraid. Curiosity had become my ally. Fear was less welcome, but persistent. He sat with me on the kitchen floor. The morning light was thin. He guided me through what he called illumination practice, not revelation as spectacle, but instruction as habit. It had 3 parts: prepare, declare, maintain. It was procedural and precise. Prepare. Place both feet flat. Ground like a pillar. Roll the shoulders back. Palms down. Feel the table's grain under fingers. Note the temperature of the room. Name one fear aloud. Give it a 3-word address. Late notice, old shame, not enough. Naming focus the mind. Breathe square until the body follows the breath. Declare. Visualize the outcome as texture and fact. I imagined the 500,000 not as a number on a screen, but as a ledger I could touch. I traced. He did not say this as a slogan. He demonstrated it with small operations. We tested on others. I practiced projecting a meeting outcome for a friend, a single positive clause, the contract signed. I did the prep, the declaration, the maintenance. 48 hours later, the friend texted, "The meeting went exactly as I visualized. The contract was signed." I did not celebrate as proof. I logged it as reproducible data. Another instance. A woman I barely knew, Rita from the corner store, was fretting about a house repair. She had the money short of the total. I applied the method for a small sum and a particular time. A neighbor, whom she had once helped, surprised her with an envelope 2 days later. Rita cried into my shoulder when she told me. She said it felt like the city had leaned in to help. Again, data stacked on data. Cyrus made one warning plain and gentle. "Do not build idols of events," he said. "The field is indifferent to drama. It responds to operator clarity." He asked me to watch how celebration and fear could both be traps. Celebration can create carelessness. Fear can create tightening that blocks flow. The perfect operator held neither as truth. Then came the conversation I had been waiting for: structure. He unfolded, without elaborate words, the skeleton of practice that would keep the system operable in daily life. It was simple and humiliatingly practical. Morning ritual. Upon waking, 3 breaths square. Hand spiral for 90 seconds. Say the morning seed. I am the measure. I choose real. I align the body. Walk into the day carrying a single image of abundance like a sealed envelope in the chest. Midday check. Pause for 90 seconds. Touch the chest. State. I hold the ledger. I do not bargain. Note 1 micro success and 1 micro failure from the last period. File both as data. Evening close. Light a small lamp or candle. Sit with palms on knees. Breathe long. Run the spiral inward. Thank the day for its responses, not in expectation, but in recognition. He gave me language to use when I spoke of the method. Use facts, not promises, he suggested. Declare conditions, not commands. The difference was subtle. A condition is a present state. I am aligned. A command is a wish delegated. Universe, give. Conditions are internal. Commands wait on external permission. I practiced the language aloud until it nested in my throat. My new loops took shape. I am the measure. I do not plead. I calibrate. I carry the ledger in my chest. Say them in different cadences. Whisper them. Say them like a register clerk. Let them change the tone of your day. There were ethical edges. Cyrus emphasized discretion. You will be tempted to test for ego, he said. Do not. Use the code to heal, to correct, to complete, not to accumulate without remit. His phrasing was not moralizing. It was directional. He asked me to imagine my ledger as public accounting. What would the ledger balance look like for a life you wanted to live? The illumination extended beyond practical routine. I felt shifts in how I conversed. Meetings became quieter. My voice had a new timbre, less pleading, more measured. People responded differently. A supplier offered more favorable terms when I spoke from that new place. A former partner called with a proposal to collaborate. These were not miracles like fireworks. They were the world rearranging itself in small, pragmatic ways. I also kept in mind limits. The method did not promise health cures or coercive control over others' will. Changes happened through alignment and consent of factors visible and invisible. I noted improvements in energy and in relationships, but I never framed the code as a cure. The honesty kept the work grounded. Mini cliffhanger. Cyrus said the true danger of the knowledge was not misuse by others, but complacency. He would leave a symbol, a code, but also a challenge. To make the method habitual enough that its absence would be painful. To be an operator meant more than occasional practice. It meant initiation into a way of living. He told me then that he would not stay much longer. The final teaching would be a transfer delicate enough to require surrender. He moved his hands slowly, like someone composing a very small song. In the air, he drew the spiral with branching lines that had felt so strange the first time I saw it. This time, as he traced the lines, they coalesced into a faint shimmer above my chest. The symbol folded into itself and then folded into me. I felt the skin at my sternum prickle. A cool warmth, paradoxical, sank into the center of the chest. Then the symbol was gone from sight and present as a memory under my ribs. The code will not work without an operator, Cyrus said. It will work better when you treat it like a craft. I asked the question that had been with me since the impossible transfer. Must I tell them? My sister, the friends, the men who would sell it for weight. Tell only those who will listen as experimenters, he replied. Not converts, not gamblers. Listeners who will respect the discipline. I promised nothing. I promised to myself everything. Over the months that followed, the symbol moved through my life like an understated compass. When fear rose, I would lay a palm over my chest and feel the memory of that spiral. The touch calmed me. The ritual returned my posture to a state of operator. I began, quietly, to change the house. I paid the urgent debts and then set aside capital for a modest relaunch of the company. I met with an old associate and proposed a new product line. The conversations were different now. My language had the steady quality Cyrus taught. People leaned in. Contracts landed with fewer haggles. My small team, 3 people I trusted, became custodians of a new culture. Clarity, precise attention, no drama. Relationships shifted. My sister Beatrice watched from the edge for a long time. She kept her pearls and her skepticism. We argued less and listened more. Once, when she visited, I simply placed my hand over my chest and said, I am doing the work. She pressed her fingers to the counter, eyes narrow, then sighed. I do not fully understand, she admitted, but I see you less anxious. It was small. It was enough. Other ripples happened that were not mine to claim. A neighbor found closure with an estranged son after weeks of quiet letters. A former employee returned to us as a consultant, offering skills I had sorely needed. A doctor I had met at a community meeting recommended me as a speaker for a small forum on resilience. None of it came as proof of a single rule. It came as accumulation. I kept a ledger not just of money but of practice. Each day I wrote 3 lines. One instance where the method moved the field, one place I failed the practice, and one correction. The ledger became a humble instrument. The act of writing anchored the habit. When I read back the pages months later, the pattern was clear. Small, steady attention begot consistent response. There were losses too. Some relationships frayed. A friend mocked the work openly at a dinner, and we did not speak for months. My name carried a whisper in places. It cost me credibility in certain circles. I accepted that. The price of change is seldom clean. Cyrus left in a quiet hour, like a tide pulling back. The ship hummed low, and then, in a flash that did not startle me now, it dissolved into a cool absence. Where he had stood, the air smelled faintly of rain on metal. I felt alone and, curiously, more capable than I had allowed myself to be. Before departing, he had given me a small set of practical rules, plain, iron-tempered. 1. Keep the morning and evening rituals. They are non-negotiable. 2. Name doubt and return within 90 seconds. 3. Use the chest anchor before any significant decision. 4. Share method only with those who have shown sustained curiosity and capacity for discipline. 5. Balance receipt with remit. Every acquisition has a corresponding obligation to the world. I carved those rules into simple actions. The chest anchor became my first motion each morning. I found the spiral image returned quicker with a touch. The phrases lived in pockets of my speech. When negotiating, I said, let's arrange terms that reflect mutual stability, then touched the chest. The other party often mirrored my pace. I did not pretend this was causal magic. I knew it was projection of steadiness. As months passed, my company grew, not in monstrous leaps, but in disciplined increments. We replaced worn equipment, hired carefully, and launched a product that met a real need. 6 months after the transfer, revenue numbers had tripled from the base I had rebuilt. The house felt solid. The code is less about creating miracles out of thin air and more about practicing a posture that invites clarity. The world responds to clarity. Mini cliffhanger. The symbol sits inside me like a key. Sometimes, in the silence of the yard, I think I feel a different current, a suggestion that others are waking to similar instruments. The question that still moves under everything is not whether the method works, it does, but what we will all choose to calibrate with the power once we remember. Sometimes I still go back in my head to the very night it began. The light first. A geometry that bled color into the grass. The air thick and cool like a cellar after rain. I can feel that night in my bones, the prickling at the base of the skull, the low hum that was not a sound but a felt pulse. I remember the smell too, metallic and sharp, like a coin rubbed between fingers. These are small, stubborn facts. They anchor the rest. I place my palm there now, at the center of my chest. The skin is warm. Beneath it, memory and code hum in a quieter register. Sometimes I press, and the old spiral returns like a tide under the ribs. It is not showy. It is not a badge to display. It is a hinge. The touch steadies me. The touch returns the time of my breath to an even count. The house feels different at night. Lamps throw slow circles on the floor. I have learned to listen to silence as if it were a language. A neighbor walks past, and the board creaks. A distant radio plays a song I half remember. All those small sounds collect into a field I now read like weather. When the field is patient, the world delivers with fewer cracks. I taught myself to make the signal domestic. Morning is small ceremony. 3 square breaths. Hands spiral for 90 seconds. A phrase, not prayer. I am the measure. I choose real. I align the body. I tuck an image into my chest, an envelope sealed in light. The phrase is short. The phrase is repeatable. It carries me into the day like a tool in my pocket. Midday I pause. 90 seconds. Palm at the sternum. I say the ledger line aloud or in thought. I hold the flow. I remit what is needed. I name one micro success and one micro failure. I log, in my head or on paper, what moved and what tightened. These are small acts of bookkeeping for a mind that is learning to be precise. Evenings are different. I light a lamp, not for show but to focus a hand. The flame is a narrow compass. I roll the spiral inward, palms resting on knees. I thank the day in small, factual phrases. Thank you for the close calls that squeezed me softer. Thank you for the openings that arrived in paper envelopes and phone calls. Gratitude here is recognition, not bargaining. The symbol in my chest stopped being mysterious and became mechanical. It is an anchor, yes, but also a codebook. When doubt arrives, I touch and recite a short loop. The sequences are simple and honest. I speak them in 3 cadences: whisper, low register, spoken like a ledger clerk. Each cadence alters the posture of the day. I do not offer the exact spirals outwardly. Cyrus taught me discretion, but I have taught the shape of the practice. Prepare, declare, maintain. People who come to me ask for tools, not miracles. They want rituals to hold the workday, a phrase to use before a difficult conversation, a way to steady the throat before a contract. I give them language that fits a human life. I practice with neighbors, with the small group that meets on Thursdays in my living room. We take measurements. We tell the truth. Not everything that is taught is gentle. Learning to operate the field costs a private tax. I lost some circles. A friend stopped speaking to me because my steadiness felt like judgment. My sister watched from the edge for months and then began to soften. She touches the counter now and says, "I don't fully understand, Miguel, but you look different." That was enough. The world trims itself around what we allow. There are receipts for everything. The method is not a charm against illness or a way to cut under other people's will. The code asks for consent from the complex tides of reality. It asks for honesty in the ledger. If you demand wealth without remit, the field mirrors the demand with constriction. If you practice as craft, you see responses that are practical in envelope, a consultancy returning, an offer that lands without the old scraping. Those are the sorts of things that happen. They are human-sized and repeatable. I keep the ledger still. It is both metaphor and object. Each evening I write 3 lines. One moved by practice, one failure, one correction. The act of writing is a muscle. The ledger taught me humility. When I read those pages months later, a pattern appears like a tide chart. Small steady attention accumulates. The code rewards consistency, not dramatics. There are limits. I have pushed at the edges. I will not pretend otherwise. Once, in a moment of hubris, I tried to accelerate a relationship that should not have been forced. The field responded with resistance, more tension, a partner withdrawing. I had to undo the push. The lesson was precise. The field reflects the quality of intention. If intention is greed clothed as need, the response is brittle. If intention is alignment, the response opens like a hinge. I learned to balance receipt with remit. Cyrus said it in his slow cadence. Every acquisition carries an obligation outward. When the 500,000 arrived, I paid debts. I repaired what had been broken. I reinvested. But I also set aside for other hands, the neighbor who needed a repair, the former employee who later returned as consultant. The ledger of life is not only what you bank, but what you circulate. Teaching became a practice of containment. People ask for shortcuts. They want the spiral tattooed on the forearm and the promises that follow. I refuse. You cannot borrow operatorship. You must practice until the absence of ritual becomes painful. That is the initiation. So I teach breathing, anchor touch, the spiral hand. I insist on measurement, daily notes, micro corrections. I watch who keeps the ledger and who keeps the craving. The neighborhood changed slowly. Small repairs became easier. A doctor came to listen and later recommended me to a forum on resilience. A former supplier began to call before bids closed. Things moved with less knuckling. My business did not explode overnight. It grew incrementally, as if someone had turned up the fidelity of decision-making. The house felt safer. Sleep deepened. The morning tightness was less constant. Those changes are subtle and real. At night, sometimes I stand by the window and imagine the sky as a ledger too. A constellation here, a blank space there. I feel the symbol hum under my palm like a private star. I think of others who may have seen different parts of the same ship. I sense smaller lights coming on across the city, a baker who learned to steady the order book, a teacher who used the spiral before a career-defining lecture, a neighbor who found closure with a stubborn family member. Different instruments, same laws. I did not write a book. I did not sell the method as an app. There were invitations. People wanted the secret packaged and repackaged. I refused. Selling it as promise felt like laundering a mystery into hype. The code is craft. Crafts need patience. Crafts need care. The physics of consciousness does not want to be simplified into slogans. It wants operators. When I teach, I give short loops, new, original to each session. These are not slogans either. They are functional. I do not plead. I calibrate. I carry the ledger. I hold the flow. I speak them in different registers. I ask students to try them for 7 days, to measure, to report honestly. Most of them do not come back. A few do. Those are the ones who become custodians. There is a tenderness to the work that surprised me. I had expected distance. I had expected either power or alienation. Instead, I found steadiness. People bring me small, human problems. A woman wanted to mend a long silence with her brother. A man wanted the courage to leave a job that ate him. A friend needed help paying for a child's operation. The field does not solve everything. It does not cure, but it rearranges the conditions so that practical solutions appear with less friction. I am cautious when I speak of ethics. Cyrus did not moralize. He gave direction. I learned to treat the ledger like public accounting. If I take without remit, the balance shifts against me. If I remit disproportionately, the field also adjusts. There is a tempering quality in the work that protects against accumulation for accumulation's sake. The most private change has been in speech. My voice is different. It carries less begging. I propose stability. I do not plead, but I can teach a method, a posture, and a set of instruments to practice. Practice is the only guarantee that matters. Over time, habit becomes sensitivity. Sensitivity becomes skill. Skill becomes service. Before Cyrus left, he said one last sentence that sits in the marrow. The physics of consciousness does not need permission. It needs an operator. I understood then that the ship, the symbol, the transfer were not favors. They were an initiation. The rest is work. If you have listened this far, here is something I will do with you now. Not to convince, not to promise. To offer a small experiment you can do where you are, tonight. Find a quiet corner. Sit. Place both feet flat. Close your eyes. Notice the temperature on your skin. Breathe in for a count of 4. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Repeat 3 times. Place your right hand over the center of the chest. Feel the heartbeat. Imagine an envelope of soft light in the chest. Do not color it with need. See it as a sealed, factual object. Say quietly, like a clerk, one of these loops. Choose one cadence and repeat it 3 times, slowly. Loop A. I am the measure. I carry the ledger. Loop B. I do not plead. I calibrate the field. Loop C. I hold the flow. I remit what is required. Say whichever lands easiest. Whisper it. Say it like a promise to a ledger. Then breathe 3 more times and open your eyes. This is a practice, not a spell. Do it for 7 mornings and note what shifts in the week. Keep small notes. Do not make it a performance. Be honest in the accounting. Before I close, a short thing about the world beyond my porch. I sense, as an operator senses, that this is not only my story. Lights are waking. Instruments different from mine are surfacing. Some people carry spirals in the chest like keys. Others will carry different symbols. Some may misuse. Many will practice with care. The field is vast. My small work is only one local tuning. The spiral in my skin is quiet. It has taught me restraint. It has taught me obligation. It has taught me that power is ecological. Power that does not return is brittle. Power that begins to feel like entitlement corrodes the operator. So I keep teaching small groups. I keep the ledger. I pay the small remits. I stand by the window at night and map the quiet lights. The city hums with human problems and human solutions. The method will not save everyone. It will save what it can in the places where attention is steady. One final loop that I say alone, in 3 cadences to close the evening. Say it with me silently if you like. It is a phrase that has become mine. It is not a boast. It is work. I am the measure. I hold the flow. I remit what is required. If you stayed to the end, thank you. If you want to try the practice, write your city and country in the comments. Tell me one small signal you noticed after a week. It helps me learn where people are tuning from. If you want to follow the next stories, subscribe so these small accounts can reach more ears. Your voice helps this work find its listeners. Short call. If you watch to the end, please subscribe and write your city/country in the comments. Your notes help us map practice and keep these stories honest. Fewer than 60 words. There are doors that open when you learn to read the weather of attention. I do not know where the next one will lead. I know that, when the ship appears again for someone else, it will feel different, less like an arrival and more like a turning. The question I leave you with is not an instruction. It is a mirror. If your conscious frequency could be any world, right now, what would you calibrate into being?